Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Angela Leah, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to go deep and nothing is off limits. Welcome back to another episode of Corralling the Chaos. Today, I have with me a very special guest. Jon Kazarian is the founder and CEO of Accelevents, which is a leading event management platform recently recognized by Inc. 5000 as a top 100 fastest growing private company in America. First of all, congrats on that. Also, as CEO, that's exciting. That's a hard list to make. So congrats on that. It's no small feat. But as CEO, Jon is also focused on leading the company's vision of helping event organizers and marketing professionals transform their events through innovative technology solutions. And that word innovative is going to be the center of our topic today. But as an industry thought leader, Jon actively publishes insights on the events landscape and frequently speaks at industry events such as Event MB's Event Tech Innovation Summit, BizBash, Live, and Inbound. And I had the pleasure of recently spending some time with him at SaaStr, which is kind of what led us here. So welcome, Jon. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Hopefully we can continue the conversation from SaaStr.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really what I wanted to kind of dig in. So I know in a lot of our conversations, we were talking about kind of the old way versus the new way. And for whatever reason, in our lovely industry, a lot of people get stuck on the old way. Although I think certainly COVID and the past few years has kind of forced people to innovate more. So I know we're going to kind of dig in there. But before we do that, first, tell us a little bit more about you and kind of how you found Accelevents. What led you there?
Yeah, so started the company about 9 years ago and kind of fell into it a little bit. I was actually working at a hedge fund and I was doing some smaller events for the hedge fund I was working at. But in 2014, my cousin, at the age of 17, got diagnosed with cancer, and I wanted to do something for her. So I was living in Boston at the time and decided to rent out the aquariums. I put my credit card down. I had to sell 180 tickets to break even, basically to be able to pay my credit card bill. And we ended up getting 840 people to that first event. But going into it, I was just battling tech the whole way, and I couldn't find solutions that either had good support, had the features or the customization we required, and realized that, look, events are hard enough. Technology needs to be there to make life easier for event organizers. And then that turned into spending the past 9 years building solutions to do just that. And today we work primarily with conferences and trade shows, across corporate associations and higher ed.
So tell us a little bit more about tell us some more about kind of your ideal customer. Who are the ones that you work closest with?
Yeah, so we're working with event marketers and event managers at companies. Those companies tend to be putting on a mix. So they have an event program, but it tends to start with conferences. Often will be brought in because they need a solution for their conferences or their trade shows, which are the most complex events in their annual program. The events like the field marketing events, user groups, the smaller meetups, there's not as much that goes into that, but often organizers are thinking about their program over the whole year, and they want a centralized system that's fully integrated with the rest of the tech stack to manage the entire life cycle of events and all of the data that they're able to capture from those events.
Is it a crowded space?
It's a lot less crowded than it was in 2021.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Why is that?
There was a lot of bandwagon fans in 2021. A lot of people that saw how much money was getting raised and they said, me too. And they went out there and pitched an idea. We were able to raise a lot of VC money based on just that and never hosted an event before.
Yeah.
So again, there's a lot of entrants because of that. There's been a lot of consolidation over the past 18 months. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to see even a little bit more of that to come. But today, the players that are really, relevant for those tier 2, tier 1 conferences, it's 5 or 6 different companies, ourselves included.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about that and probably played a big part into your growth, which kind of led you to being named in the Inc. 5000 is I feel like in this industry, there's a lot of barriers to entry. You kind of have to have lived the problem to effectively solve it and to know how to do it. So I think just in the story you shared with the aquarium, you lived it, you saw the problem, and you're like, hey, there's not a lot of good solutions out there. So you decide to go build it. So I think that's a big differentiator for people in our industry.
Yeah, and I'll take that a step further because you're not going to live every scenario.
Right.
I think the most important part when you're building technology for event people is that you've lived the experience enough to have the empathy to know why those intricacies matter and the amount of time that gets wasted, the amount of frustration that gets created when the solution isn't there to streamline those processes.
Yeah, empathy is certainly a big part when you're building any software. You kind of got to feel their pain and then also be curious enough to understand it even more at a deeper level, to your point, right? There's no way to experience every aspect of it, but you've had to experience enough of it to then be curious to kind of fill in the missing pieces. So I think that's fantastic. And I love how your company, I know we were talking at SaaStr, and I know part of what we're talking about today is innovation. Tell the audience what you did at Inbound, because our team met your team, because we had a team up at Inbound as well while I was out at SaaStr. But tell them a little bit about how you approached that event in an innovative way.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of home court advantage in Boston. I'm from Boston. We have a couple of other people in Boston. Half of my high school works at HubSpot. And one of our director of sales has this it's called a Freedom Boat Club. It's like the zip car of boats. And they just happen to have a location that's a 7-minute walk from the convention center in Boston where Inbound took place. So we, using our platform, set up an approval workflow where people could basically apply to come out for a boat ride. We took them for a 1-hour lap around Boston Harbor, which is if you've never been to Boston, it's the best part of the city. It's incredible. The views are unreal. The history is really cool. So it's just a great opportunity to get people together. But they were small, intimate groups. We had 2 people on our team, 10 others on each boat. And we just curated this really close group of people that could come together and have these conversations around events, around marketing, while experiencing the city. And we did all of this I think we had 92 registrants. We took out 70 something people for under $500.
It's amazing. Yeah, I love that. I love the creativity. And again, I know our team participated in that, and they sent me pictures. I'm like, wait a second, I was just talking to Jon about that. I know exactly what you're doing up there. Well, right. I think that's awesome. I think
you and I were at our 7th dinner at Pinstripes, and they're cruising around Boston Harbor.
Exactly. SaaStr was a fun time too, though, for sure. Yeah. Well, as we were prepping for this episode, we asked you a question around kind of what your biggest frustration in the industry is. And I want to read your exact answer, and then I want us to talk about it. Your exact answer was a failure to identify why they're hosting an event, number one, so understanding the why, and then how to execute towards that specific goal. So talk to us more about that. Tell us why that's such a frustration, and how do we go about fixing that?
Yeah, I think it stems from a disconnect from the C-suite to the events team. And I mean, you see this and hear about this most frequently with the way that events people are measured. Often it's just pure leads or lead scans in a booth. It's not the actual impact that they're making on the business. So when it comes to the issue around the why, I think once companies hit a certain scale, they feel obligated to host events, and it literally stops there. There's not the conversation around what's the goal of this event, who's the target audience. How are we going to make this event different than the other events in the industry? And how are we going to communicate that to the potential attendees of this event? And then it just becomes this focus on the almost blind execution and these activations that aren't tied back to a core principle of why the event is taking place in the first place. And what happens is then at the end of the event, you look back and again, you measure on some vanity metric like number of registrations or number of leads generated that don't necessarily translate into what you were hoping would be accomplished from that event. And it creates a disconnect again between C-suite and the event team where you can't actually say if it was successful or not.
So if we're going to move away from the vanity metrics, because I agree, everyone kind of comes to the table with the same thing. And then you're right, they're like a deer in headlights when you say, well, why is that important to you? Well, I don't know. It's just because that's what we've always measured on. So if we're going to move away from the vanity measurements and metrics, what are some of the measurements they should be thinking about?
Well, if we're going to call, say, registration a vanity metric, I want to be clear with the difference between an event that is hosted by a brand versus an event where the business that's hosting the event, they're primarily in the business of running events. Because in that case, you're generating revenue primarily through sponsorship, and it's no longer a vanity metric. The number of impressions that you can get for the brands that are sponsoring your event is critical to the event. When you're running a brand event, it's quality of the people that are attending there. Are these customers that you have the opportunity to upsell? Are they prospects that you can get over the finish line? Is there an opportunity to put customers in front of prospects to get them over the finish line? So if you're focused more from the perspective of a brand and measuring success there, one of the things that we always suggest people look at is expansion revenue within the book from people that attended the event versus folks that didn't. And I'll give you an example of one way that you can really capture data from events to better understand where upside expansion opportunities are. So let's say you're in an organization like HubSpot, right? You've got multiple product lines, sales, CRM, service. You might have customers that are already on your CRM product, but you notice that when they're attending your events, 40% of the sessions they went to were related to your Service Hub product. That should be triggering a flow for your account managers, so they're actively going out and trying to get to the bottom of what stemmed that curiosity for those folks. And then you're able to measure, okay, this was expansion revenue influence from this customer event.
So if you're the event production company tasked with whether it's the creative or the execution, how should they be building in an understanding of how to do that better? Like, how do they challenge that event owner to think about the successful outcome differently, or how they should be measuring that? Like, if you sat in their shoes and somebody came to them and said, hey, we want you to put together the creative for this, the execution for it, how do they challenge those companies to think about that differently?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would ask is get in writing, what's the goal of this event? Like, what is the quantifiable measure of success of this event? And then challenge the person who wrote that down, your customer, and say, okay, if you hit that number, are you going to get expansion budget for this event next year?
Yeah. So asking them why is that the goal? What does it mean? Why is that important? What are you going to, if you hit it, what does that mean for you? If you don't hit it, what does that mean for you?
Exactly.
Got it.
And if it's a vanity metric, it makes you feel good because you had a certain number of attendees there. That doesn't translate into more cash flow for the business that's going to get you an expanded budget and able to do more next year. Yeah. So really get to the root of why are we hosting this event and how is it going to drive the business forward?
So why has the need to challenge customers in that way changed so drastically? I feel like it's always been done that way years before. It's like, great, if that's what your metric is, great, we can help you do that. Could care less, right? If you hit, not care less if you hit it or not, but why are they so attached to challenging the customer to think about it differently? Why has that mindset changed?
Because the organization itself has become more data centric on quantifying marketing activity. And this really got accelerated as a result of virtual events during COVID, where everything became a lot more measurable. Yeah. But the other thing that happened during that same period of time is the changes with the effectiveness of digital advertising and the reduction in third-party cookie tracking, which has taken people that are historically demand gen marketers, and their role has grown within the marketing organization, but it's also shifted some of their focus to look more holistically at the impact of events. And events make up 20 to 25%, in some cases 30% of B2B marketing budget. So it's a huge chunk, right? You've got this demand gen marketer who's a very quantitative person now assessing the success of events from that lens. And that's just changed the way that events are measured.
Yeah, I feel like the innovation in MarTech has probably spawned a lot of this, right? Like the data people are tracking is very different than before because you actually now can track those things. And so MarTech, I feel like, changes so fast. So the smarter these companies get and the more they're investing in that, the further they're going to dig to kind of understand the ROI if they're going to put budget dollars behind it. Which again, Absolutely. Back to that word innovation, things are changing very, very quickly and you're either going to keep up or you're going to be left out. I kind of feel like those are the two options. So that's important. Well, let's talk a little bit about the traditional conference model. And I know that's something that you have said in the past should probably be reevaluated. So I'd love to know how you think it should change in your opinion.
Yeah. So I think SaaStr, we talked about SaaStr already. I think they did a fantastic job of this because it was almost like this hybrid conference trade show combined. And I'll tell you, their podcast is one of my favorite podcasts. I intentionally didn't go to the sessions because I love, like, when I go for a run, I listen to that podcast.
We talked about that. Yeah. Yes, you're right.
I didn't want to run out of content to listen to.
Yeah, that's right.
But because there's so many other formats for accessing that content now, it almost makes the content less of the function of the event. And what's so important is it's the people, right?
Yeah.
How do you get access to the people that you want to be with? And how do you make sure that your time doing so is efficient? And it's vendors. You know, that show in particular, a lot of people are there because they actually want to meet the vendors that are there. That's a good thing. And they've done a great job curating an audience around just that and creating an environment where that's possible.
Do you think most event organizers miss that opportunity and instead it's just about sponsorship dollars versus the right sponsorship dollars?
100%. And it's the format and how you do it, right? Like, nobody wants like a Comdex, 1978 square booth trade show floor boring environment anymore.
Yeah.
Like, we want to be engaged. We want to be enticed. We want to be seeing creative ideas surrounded by interesting people that we can have a good conversation with and learn something from. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. And if you focus on giving people an opportunity in an environment where they can do that and reduce the barrier to entry there, then you're going to make it an event that's a lot harder to replace because there's enough mechanisms for just accessing content.
So how does that look different? Not just the approach to sponsorships, but you mentioned SaaStr, right? And how it was just done differently.
Yeah.
What are some other changes and patterns or trends that you're kind of seeing in how people are organizing their events?
Yeah. Well, one thing that we're seeing a ton of right now, and we talked about this with the boat rides, or, Pinstripes it's a bowling alley bar venue that's right by SaaStr. The third-party events are huge. When you're talking about call it tier one event, an ecosystem event like Inbound or SaaStr, the events the side events that are tacked on top of that they're so crucial to the entire experience. And the most successful event organizers are putting that forward. They're really appreciating that. And they're going out of their way to promote those side events because, again, it's part of the ecosystem. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to generate more revenue because in many cases, companies are opting to do a side event instead of directly sponsoring the event.
Yeah.
But more people are going to the event because they know they need to be at those side events.
So less content, more connection, more opportunities for that connection to happen.
Yeah. And it's creating organic opportunities for it. It's not the forced, it's not necessarily the hosted buyer, meet and greet, 6-minute speed dating thing. It's creating fun activations. And you're seeing this with the tier one sponsorship packets today. I got a sponsorship package last week. It's 70 pages long. And of that, probably 40 pages are the most out there ideas on things that you can sponsor, from the room key cards to actually boat cruises being one of them.
Yeah.
And it's just around these different experiences that can bring people together. And then the effort from the organizer to curate the people that are going to be there.
Well, I think companies have to get comfortable investing, to your point, in the experiences when you can't always have a measurable outcome, right? If you are facilitating connections, right? If you're facilitating those experiences, sometimes that doesn't always equate into a quantitative result, right? Sometimes it has a much longer tail on it, but that typically can be a bigger driver for attendance and some of those other things.
Yeah. And we're seeing more technology out there today for tracking referral. So you register for an event, you post your referral link, and the ability to track who else is attending the event because of that. But one metric that we never hear about is retention rate for attendees. So easy to track, and it's such a good testament to how successful that event was.
Yeah. That is your CSAT, right? If I'm satisfied, I'm coming back, and I'm going to come back again. I'm going to bring people with me, and I'm going to refer people to come with me. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think back to another event I was at a few months ago, and the organizer of that event sold $1 million worth of tickets on the second day of their event. So for the next event that was 6 months later, they'd sold $1 million of tickets for that event. Just to
Talk
the
about immediate feedback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you've got these people, you gave them a discount. They know your event style and format. They're advocates immediately, and they're out selling your event on their behalf because they want their community there because it makes it more valuable to them too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. There's that word community again. Um, well, so obviously, Lasso, we're in the event tech space. You at Accelevents, also in the event tech space. So I think it's fair to say we each have a pretty large vested interest in the success of this space. And building technology is not inexpensive. It's not easy. It's not cheap. Very different than a service model, right? And so, but tech often gets in the way, sometimes more than it can help, depending on that technology and how it's leveraged. So, why do you think that is, and how do you think that issue could be eliminated as far as leveraging technology?
I think that the first place that it becomes more of a hindrance than additive is it's false hopes or expectations on what it's going to be able to do. It's when the technology doesn't quite go as far as it needs to, and then it creates a very time intensive manual task to finish the job. And what we've set out to do from day one is basically this mantra that if we can help an organizer get an extra hour of sleep the night before their event, then we're doing our job. So how can the technology be there to de-stress, de-risk, and save you time purely by executing on your behalf?
So, how do you describe the ROI that Accelevent brings to your customers? Like,
Yeah.
what is that quantitative kind of piece? I mean, you just talked about sleeping better at night. Obviously, that's important. Ease of use important. But what's the ROI triggers that you all focus on?
Yeah. Well, because you brought up that ease of use aspect, I posted on LinkedIn the other day and I got like 100 comments, and I asked why would you pick HubSpot over Salesforce? And every single time it's because I can get done what I need to do faster and easier and with less resources. I don't need an admin to help me do it. And I think the same is true for the event tech industry today, where, event people they're the type of person who's going to go from designing a flyer to 20 feet in the air on a ladder in the matter of 15 seconds. They want the power in their hands to control the experience the way that they need to do it. And they want somebody who recognizes the sense of urgency that comes with managing events. And that's what they're looking for in a technology partner. They want the power in their hands, and they want to know they have the support when they need it. And, as we think about where we deliver ROI for our customers, it's just that. We help them get done what they need to faster, and we have 24/7, 365 support.
Yep.
Median response times less than 30 seconds. We're always there, and we treat your event with the same sense of urgency that you do. So that is a huge piece of it. The other aspect, and this gets more probably to the measurable part of ROI, is everybody wants their event to be unique and different. And a lot of people have historically felt like you need to bolt together different technology solutions to do that. We're approaching this from the perspective of let's give you all the tools that you need in a flexible way, but all under one roof with the same data stack so that you can do that all, but it creates a seamless experience for you. And probably more important, it creates a seamless experience for your attendees. We've all been to events where you use one login for registration, then you use another login to book your agenda,
Yes.
and another login
so
for
clunky. Yes.
Yeah, for the app. So it's like that experience shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Well, you said it earlier too. I mean, you just hit it again, right? It's ease of use, and you also alluded earlier, and something similar that we say around here. We always say events are hard. Your software shouldn't be, right? Like by nature of what they're doing and producing or hosting or organizing an event is really hard with a million different moving pieces. So the tools that you use, to your point, it shouldn't take a whole manual to try to figure. You should be able to log in, know your way around, do your job without it being this whole thing to try to get up to speed and it not being clunky to use. So I think that's a really important piece for our industry. It's just the ease of use. Just make it easy. Keep it simple.
Is. I mean, it's so true. And I think the other thing that happens is that you end up getting one power user. With some of the more legacy platforms out there, you get a power user who knows this thing inside and out. They're an expert. They can do anything they possibly would ever want to do. They absolutely love the platform because they know it that well. And now it's day of the event, and 15 people are asking them to do something because none of those other people can do the thing that they need to do on their own. And when you empower the end user to actually execute on their own, like HubSpot has done, it allows them to be more productive. It decreases your operational load, and it takes away that central point of failure who's inevitably going to be overwhelmed in the days leading up to your event.
Yeah. Because you're right, people aren't going to adopt it if it's too clunky and hard to use.
No.
They're just not.
And one person becomes the expert, and that
Yep.
becomes like their differentiator within the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. Spoken like two true software professionals, right? Ease of use, got to be easy to adopt.
Yeah.
We're going to keep saying it. We're going to just keep preaching it.
I don't think anyone minds hearing that.
No, you're right. It's what they want. Got to give them what they want. So I'm with you.
Yeah, but I'll say you can't compromise on flexibility.
Right.
Every event should be unique, and I think that's one thing that we learned in 2020 and thereafter. Before that, there was just so much consistency from one event to the next, one brand to the next, and now brands are really focused on the experiential element of differentiating their event, and the technology needs to be, it's the first impression that people have with your event. It needs to do that as well. So you need to have that power and customization, but that doesn't mean it has to be hard.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think that's the trick in building software, right? It's got to be, because you're right, every event's different. Everything's custom, right? Which is what they're, they want to be remembered for being different and creating something unique. And I think it's the challenge in building software, and the good ones like Accelevent do this because you can build something flexible enough, but also something easy. And I think that's a really hard balance to kind of find. So congrats to you all for finding that, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What makes it hard is that you have to say no, right? When you've got a 50, 100K deal on the line, and yeah, if we add this feature, we'd win that deal and we can get it done in time, and that's not going to be an issue. But sometimes you just have to say no, because it's going to impact the rest of your roadmap. It's going to impact the user experience. It's going to add complexity, and it's not reusable because it's so niche that it doesn't make sense. And once you learn where and when, and this, I mean, we've been at it for 9 years and we're learning every day, you learn how to prioritize. I think it puts you in a position where you can build for the long term.
Yeah. And I think companies appreciate that. I mean, at Lasso, we do the same thing, because just because they want a button to look like this or do this, or they want the workflow, sometimes our best customers are the ones when we're able to say, we're going to keep you from making a mistake. We're not going to do that. Here's why. And here's why you actually don't want us to do that. And I think our customers will position themselves better when they also push back on their clients in the same. I know you think you want your event to do this, but let me challenge you to think differently, right? Now you're adding value before you've even produced the event, right? You're challenging the customer to think differently, which I think is good for the company. It's good for the customer. So I think knowing how to do that is really important versus just saying yes to everything.
Yeah, I mean, and that entire concept, like it's in software, it's opinionated software development. In sales, it's the challenger sale. Like that concept is so true.
Love that book.
The reality is you end up with a customer who's more aligned with you. And that's how you make sure that your expectations with the customer are aligned the same way that that customer needs to make sure that their expectations with the C-suite are aligned.
Yeah. Preaching to the choir. Love that book, Challenger Sale. Yep. Well, I think that's something we all could do better. And I think our customers deserve that from us, right? Is to us to keep them from making mistakes. That's our goal.
They're burned because of what happened in 2020 and 21, where they were getting a lot of promises by companies that raised a lot of money. They were growing really fast, and they were obligated to win as much possible revenue to appease the VCs that they raised
at
money
all
from.
costs. Yep.
Exactly. And then it would just burn bridges because they wouldn't be able to deliver. They wouldn't be able to execute. And there's a handful of companies that were around well before COVID, companies that have taken a more sustainable approach to growth, that are building for the long haul. And it's led, not just to a user experience that's more scalable, but also to an underlying data model, the things that you can't see that make sure that that business is going to be here to stay, because at the end of the day, it all does boil down to the data model, and that's what allows you to expand the product.
Yep. Agreed. Well, Jon, I always like to ask my guests at the end one final question, and that is, what do you hope for our industry?
I love events. That's why I've decided to bet my career on it. But one thing that scares me about this industry right now, and it's something that you and I talked about in San Mateo, was there aren't that many young people entering the space today. And I think you're the one who said this, but a big part of the reason is that there's not very much clarity around what the career path looks like. So if there's one thing that I can hope for our industry, it's that there becomes more resources and more visibility around what that career path looks like. Because with the way that marketing is changing today, events are becoming, I'd argue already are, the most important channel for businesses to grow and retain their customers.
100% agree. Yeah. And that was not the case 5 years ago.
No, it certainly was not.
At all. I feel like there's been a tremendous shift in that. And so if that is where the budget dollars are going to go and the focus and time and energy is going to go and their go-to-market is to focus on events and field marketing and those sorts of things, then it's important we've got an industry ready to capture that.
Yeah. Now, one thing I think is going to be good is that when there are more young people that are entering this industry, I do think they're going to be more data-centric.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be more of this.
Everyone has to be more data centric. Like
they have to be.
Those are table stakes right now, and will forever be. There is no more doing anything without focused on the data and letting the data lead your decisions.
But for some people that have been focused on the experience side for multiple decades in their career, and they know that perfectly, the switch to looking at more of a data lens is a big change. And when you start from the beginning by approaching it from a data lens, which we're seeing with demand gen people that are getting more involved with events, and I think we're going to see with younger people entering the space, I think it allows you to approach the events and the experiences in a different way.
Yeah, 100% agree. Well, I've got a few takeaways from our conversation, and thank you for being here and helping us unpack it. But I think, the couple takeaways that I have is, first of all, you have to innovate. It is no longer an option to just kind of do things the way they were before and innovate on a big scale, right? Like really creative innovation, not iteration, innovation. And a lot of companies are still stuck kind of iterating, tweaking a thing, this here and that there, and getting their clients to do the same. And I think we've got to approach it completely differently, because I think if you don't, you're just not going to have a place in this industry. Which is exciting to me. Hopefully that's exciting to our audience, because that's what makes it fun, right? No two events are ever the same. How do you push the envelope? How do you think creatively? And it doesn't always mean spend more and go bigger, right? It's getting creative. And so I think that's the ask and what's ahead for our industry. And then the second thing is innovation doesn't have to be hard. I think, keep it simple, make it easy. Sometimes the best things are the easiest and cheapest. But again, it takes that creativity to do that. And so I appreciate you being here to kind of help us unpack that. Really enjoyed the conversation.
As did I.
Well, thanks again, Jon, for being with us. For our audience, if they want to get in touch with you or follow some of your content, I know I do. You've got great content. How can they find you?
Yeah, definitely. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Jonathan Kazarian. And you can also check out our website, accelevents.com, ACCEL events.
Awesome. And congrats on a great year with the Inc. 5000. That's awesome. You guys are doing great things, and appreciate you being here.
We're really excited. Thanks again for having me on.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. If you like what you hear, be sure to hit subscribe. We also have a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to at our website at lasso.io under resources. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io. Thanks, everybody.